Welcome to another How to Succeed podcast, the show that helps you get to the top and stay there. Brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training. And this week, organizational excellence with Jim Dunn, a longtime Sandler trainer from Charlotte, North Carolina. We're going to be talking about how to succeed at organizational excellence. And this one is particularly for the leaders out there, but if you're a salesperson, maybe you aspire to be an entrepreneur or a leader someday, we'll get into that and how you can put together that too. I think it's a really great topic for first-time people as well as experienced leaders and owners that maybe, have something holding them back. And we're going to figure out what that is and how we can help you get to the next level here on the How to Succeed podcast. All right, Jim. Let's talk about organizational excellence. What is it? What does that mean? And what are we talking about this week?
Hey, Mike. Glad to be on the show again. And organizational excellence, I absolutely love it. Most people are good at what they do, particular skill. But when it comes to organizational excellence, perhaps not so much. So what is it? It really is it's the performance of the business and run in really an impeccable manner. And all of the team is really in unison. And what that really means is that when there's a problem, they are all aware of it and they know what to do to take care of that. And thirdly, they're always pushing and they're growing and they're expanding and they're going past comfort zones. And they are up to date on all of the new technology and new capabilities for the team. And it's always changing. It's never static. So the idea is that most people think, okay, we've got it fixed. So organizational excellence is a continuous revolving way of how can we get better? How can our team get better? And how can we always support our customers and keep growing?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I was a guest on an entrepreneurship podcast this week, and I was talking about the role of a leader. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of people get this wrong in their attitude. They think that they need to be controlled, be very involved, be able to fight fires, like you said, come up and understand all these latest technologies. And it's actually the opposite is true. If you're the leader, the owner of the business, your job is to make yourself irrelevant. Your job is to get these systems and processes and people in place so that you're not needed at all in that business. And then you can work on higher level strategy and stuff. Would you agree with that? And any other kind of misconceptions or common mistakes you see with leaders?
Totally agree. At any start of a new venture, usually 90% of the time, the business owner, the entrepreneur is running the business. And then 10% of the time, maybe delegating others. But what happens with really well-run and excellent companies is that leader is really only involved in the business 10% of the time. So 90% of the time, they either have hired a great executive team running it, or they certainly have delegated all of those responsibilities elsewhere, which kind of reminds me too, Mike, of one of my favorite Sandler rules: leave your little kid in the car. A lot of times what that means is our little kid is our ego and our emotional state. A lot of times leaders, they want to be involved. They want to always be in the front. And that's one of the hardest things for leaders to really recognize, is that the company as it grows is probably going to be better if other people are managing it and they are less involved in that day-to-day operation.
So let me jump in there and ask you a tough question here, because passion for the business and growing it and you're on the hook is extremely important. But those emotions and maybe day-to-day anxieties or letting your emotions show can be a detriment to the business. How do you balance those two?
You really have to have that objectivity. So emotions are certainly all part of all of us as human beings. But we really need to be objective. And what I love so much about organizational excellence is the fact that there's some really great tools that are involved with that. So those tools help us to be objective. And I also have to have a humility in a sense that, you know what, I'm probably better hiring someone else to do this who can do a better job of this than I can myself. And I've always been a real big believer in the fact that once you hire someone else, not to be working on your unique ability, but to be working on their unique ability, the whole organization grows. So it's usually a 3-for-1 thing.
I love that. And I think that objectivity is maybe setting the long term vision, but
Yeah.
trying to stay out of those short term emotions and, day to day fluctuations of where it is. You have to have the patience and humility to let people make mistakes, let small things go, and really keep that vision and long term outcome of the business drive what you're doing as a leader, right?
Well, it all begins with vision. It does. And that's where, the owner, the leader of the organization, it's important that they really talk about what that vision looks like. Yet you have to get others involved because it's not just my mission per se, but it is really the mission of the team and really where we are headed. And also, you mentioned that P word, the passion. Passion is so important. And usually, what we find is the leader or the leadership team has the passion. The issue with any great organization, and that's really what we're talking about, and even great salespeople, because a lot of salespeople are working on this, is that each person has to have that passion. So it really gets effused, if you will, through the whole organization, from the leader all the way down to the newest employee coming in, of sharing that passion. How do you do that? How do you convey that? Easier said than done, but that's what great leaders are able to do, is they're able to have and create a huge why within the organization, the why, the how, and the what.
We have a lot of tools for that in the passion bucket that you mentioned. But as we move to the behavior part of our conversation here, there's 5 other P's in this organizational excellence program that Sandler teaches. And I think they're more the operational, the goals, plans, and actions that come in on those. So can you walk us through the rest of these and maybe how leaders can think about creating a well-run or excellent organization versus getting tripped up in that day-to-day stuff?
Yeah, Mike, I think it even goes back to, some of the great Sandler principles, even on the sales side of pay time and no pay time. And if you really diagnose that, both are really important. In other words, no pay time is important. Yet I have to make sure that I am spending enough time on the pay side. Now, what does that mean in organizational excellence? I think one of the really groundbreaking and phenomenal tools and exercises talking about behavior is working on your 3 priorities. And not only yours, but really throughout the whole team. So each team creates those 3 priorities, and they really run the whole business. And divisions can have that as well. So we define what those priorities are, and we expand upon those. But then we also have, as you mentioned, the other P's. You've got to have the structure. That's the positions. So what is my org chart going to look like? Or really, what's really exciting is where is it going to look? What's it going to look like 3 years from now? And how will I structure that? And then with any organization, it's about people. And with the people, you have to have those individual training needs. How are my people being developed? And this is the problem with a lot of organizations is that they hire people on, they know training's good, but they stop. And is there really any reinforcement? But not only that, how am I helping John and Mary to progress in the next 90 days? What's an individual training need that I could work on? And then from there, every good company has processes, right? How they do what they do. And are we really defining that process? And here again, it's easy to get lazy. It's easy for a lot of businesses to say, yeah, we already have that in play. We've already got that process. And yet new technology comes into it, and how can we get better at it? Maybe there's one less step. Maybe we really have to add a little bit more in with that. So as really, you're talking about these 6 Ps that we talk about in organizational excellence, from planning all the way to passion. And we've already spoken about a few of them. And then finally, there's a very important piece in there that we haven't spoken about yet, which is the performance, the metrics that are tied into how do we know the processes that we have defined are really working.
Yeah, I want to dive into these middle four separately. So let's go a little bit deeper into the positions and the people, because I think there's sort of a catch-22 here where like it feels weird to create the positions until you have the people or you can afford the people. And sometimes you want to hire a great person and then find out where they fit. And it's little musical chairs, or it
Yeah.
could be that somebody redefines a position based on their skill set and stuff. So tell me how these two go together, and the idea of like creating an ideal organizational chart, and then just kind of, how do we get as close to that ideal as possible with the people that we have?
Well, it all starts with the 3 priorities, Mike. And that really is the key to this whole thing is that has the company defined what those 3 main goals, objectives, priorities are, and have we really built a plan around that? From that plan, then the positions are, now let's have that org chart. And let's not put names of people in there. This is really important. You really define the role. And the more that you define the role, then you can begin to put other elements of what's most important to that. And not only that, what's exciting is you're thinking about new positions that need to be added. Maybe you're going to hire an IT person that's going to come on, or HR, or whatever that is. So on the positions, it's not only the org chart, but you're redefining what each one of those roles need to be. And you could be adding to what those roles really need to be. And from there, on the people end of it, it's all about the growth and development. It's all about how do we recruit new people for the positions of the org chart. And one of my favorite tools is our search model, in a sense of that acronym of SEARCH, which is, what are the skills that they need to have? What's the experience that they need to have? What attitude do they need to really convey? And it's not just a good attitude. It's, are they resourceful? Or are they learner? Are they a learner? What results have they had? What cognitive capabilities do they have? And lastly, what habits do they have? So in the people end of it, it's not only the building of the recruiting, but it's taking a look at your current team and how do they grow? It's my responsibility to help my team members grow. If they're not growing, they're moving backwards.
All of that was awesome. Can I have your permission to take a quick sidebar?
Yes.
After 30 years, do you ever still start like the search matrix or the 6 Ps and get halfway through and go, do I still remember what all of these stand for, or how many Ps I've gone through? Because I still panic after 25 years.
Once I get going, I just keep going, Mike. I've been blessed for that.
Awesome. So the other two I wanted to put together are the processes and the perform metrics, because I think they go together. It's like,
yes.
And a lot of what we're talking about is scaling here. So if you're a small business, you got 3 people, they're in a lot of different roles, and you can kind of make it up as you go along. And as long as the operations person knows how to do the operations, you're okay. But once you start hiring multiple people, you're trying to get to scale, you're trying to get people that don't have the history of the company involved, that's where really getting your systems and processes down are important. And you start to get so many people that you can't watch every day. If you're a small business with 3 to 10 people, who's showing up, who didn't show up, which job went well, which one didn't. But when you get to a certain scale, it becomes really important to have metrics as a dashboard for you to see the overall health of your company. Can you talk about these two for a little bit?
Yeah. Mike, here's the issue. A lot of companies have processes and it's like, check. These two really go together because I not only have to have a process, but I need to know, is it working? And those are two skill sets. And it's difficult not only to set the process, but I think it's more difficult to say, all right, well, how are we going to track this? And that's where I think people begin to become a little bit lazy, or they're not checking and they're not really adding in new technology that can help them. And today the technology is incredible to where it can really help you. So you need to put those two pieces into play. And then also somebody has to be responsible. Right? That's all part of the manager and the leader is that holding people responsible. So for example, in process, for many companies who are listening in today, my question to you is, do you have a well-written sales process? That's just one example right there of that. Another would be, do you have a great way of onboarding your customers and your clients? Because obviously we want to keep them. So are those steps in play? And then how am I able to manage that for my sales process, and however many members of the sales team that I have, are they doing what the sales process really says? So, because if they do it, you're going to become successful. But if they don't do it, but here's the problem: we get so busy in our own little world. And so we need to schedule some time to where we really bring those in play. One other comment I'd like to make, Mike, about this right here too, is that as I facilitate and work with other businesses, and we work on these organizational excellence skills, what's really cool is bringing other businesses in and just watching the brain really move, and getting examples of other companies and businesses. Could be an HVAC company, someone else that completely different from theirs, of what processes that they need to be put into place, and they get great ideas as a result of that. So that's really one thing I want to convey. Don't do this in a vacuum. Do this with other businesses, non-competing, of course, but do it with other businesses where you're brainstorming. And it's almost like your own internal board that is meeting and holding you accountable and really getting good ideas.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go too. I know Dave Matson's favorite talk track is the playbook, and creating a playbook for everybody, but continually updating those plays, and I'm here in Kansas City Chiefs country, but Andy Reid's playbook changes every year. It's like 400 pages, but they can flip out a wide receiver and still run the play. They can hire new personnel every year because the systems, processes, and plays are all good. And they don't just say, oh, what worked last year won us the Super Bowl, so we're going to keep that playbook and go again this year. Because now everybody else has seen the playbook and the world has changed and the personnel is different. And so I think one of the big things people miss is they either have no systems and processes, right, or they are really in love with the system and processes they have, and it's not flexible to adapt and grow. And so that's really the challenge and the balance here on this one, I think.
Yeah, every 90 days, we really need to take a look at that. And I'll make another mention about playbook. I love playbooks, and yet it's how I execute well on that. So as I look at one of those P's is performance. How well am I doing? So you mentioned, the wide receiver. A wide receiver can have a play, yet they really need to know as they're running that route, is that the timing that they have with that quarterback and really running that route and when to make that turn, and are they consistent with that? So as much as I love playbooks, I need to execute well. And that's where one of the tools of like individual training needs really comes into play. Because remember, one of our goals is as a coach. And as a coach, we're always observing our people, and we need to be thinking about how they can improve in the next 30 to 90 days, always, every one of us. And so the whole background behind this is really, am I a good learner? Are the people that are part of our organization, are they really open and receptive to learning and growing and stretching out their comfort zones?
Love that. You mentioned tools, and that brings us to techniques, the last corner of our triangle here. And there are 24 tools in our organizational excellence program. And we're practicing what we preach. We've just revamped and rebranded all of these with our new logo and took a new pass at it, making sure that we have the best program possible out there. But the one we haven't talked about is planning. And I think there's a lot of really great planning tools as well. But any other tools that jump out to you that you think we should cover here from the organizational excellence program?
Yeah, Mike, I will share with you some tools that a current client of mine, a regional accounting firm, had shared with me that was actually a game changer. In fact, I'll give you what those three tools are, and one of them is in planning. The three tools, number one, are the establishing the three priorities. When you and your team are getting together and deciding, arguing, bantering back and forth, really, of what those three priorities are. The second tool was called the onboarder. I was talking with my CPA firm, and that they were having trouble keeping people. And they said this was a game changer, because now they really put on there what was most important when they're bringing on a new employee, and having quizzes and having some tests along the way to make sure that that the new employees owned what was most important, and having some structure behind that. And the third tool that they use and continue to use is something called an individual training needs, ITN. And you take a look at each employee, whether they're an administrator, or whether it's a salesperson, or whether it's someone in HR as a manager. And you're looking at, in the next 30 days, what improvements can I make? And that brings in that coaching element of a good manager working with people. So you mentioned 24 tools. It's amazing. It's actually, there's like around over 30 tools that are involved. Some of the main concepts there have a couple of tools associated with that. So you're just thinking of that. Not every company is going to have those tools in place. So somewhere along the line, someone's going to say, we need to change in this area.
Well, and I think that it's interesting as we look at the sort of techniques bucket, is that it highlights that individual training need, because each individual organization also has their own training need. And so you might not need all 30 of the tools. Some of them may not apply very much, or might not be relevant to your structure or anything. But out of 30, there's one that you're missing, that you're going to go,
one to three that you're missing.
That was it, right?
Yeah.
And that's that customization. I think it's so it's cool. And to me, as a somebody who's trying to help a international training organization create tools that apply in every industry and every size company around the world, it's very frustrating that doesn't really work anymore in today's world. But it's also a cool part that we can create online courses so fast, and we can create custom tools for your company, or we have 400 different coaches around the world that can have a conversation with you. So, if you're in accounting or professional services, Jim is a really great option here. I know we have people that specialize in commercial real estate or manufacturing and all kinds of different things that you really need to figure out your plan, what your bottlenecks are, where you get stuck. And I guess one of the things we didn't talk about, Jim, here is like a performance gap analysis, or any sort of assessment or evaluation of where you're currently at, because I think that's one of the hardest things in getting to excellent, is you have to identify these blind spots and bottlenecks that you would have fixed already if you knew what they were. What's your go-to way of helping organizations do that?
Well, it's interesting you talk about blind spots, because one of the first exercises that we do when somebody wants to improve or be a part of organizational excellence is they go through 14 blind spots, and really in a business assessment of what's working and what's not working. I remember I did this years ago as a Sandler franchisee, and I became sick to my stomach, because I thought I was running a pretty good business. And after taking this assessment, I recognized there were lots of gaps, and I was the problem. And that's never fun to realize, but it really was true. So we do assessments for personality. I mean, or for communication style, DISC. Sandler has a lot of assessments. Many companies listening, I'm sure, have done lots of assessments. But I think ask yourself the question: when was the last time you and your team honestly did take an assessment of how is our business doing in relation to positions, to people, to processes? So that would be a good thing.
I got a little blurry there if you're watching the video, but that's all right. Hopefully you're enjoying the audio podcast as well. You can subscribe wherever you're listening or watching the podcast at the moment. And Jim, I guess I just wanted to give you one more crack at it because that was awesome. I think if you want to know what your blind spots are, have your Taylor Swift moment. I'm the problem. It's me. Reach out to your Sandler coach. If you don't have one, go to Sandler.com, click on find a training location, and we'll help you get started there. Anything else I should have asked you that we missed, or anything you want to share with the audience before we go, Jim?
The only thing I would share with everybody listening in here is that always be a learner. And your people, you always want to make sure that that your people are learning, they're growing, they're listening, watching podcasts like this, they're reading, they are growing professionally. And so I think that part of that organizational excellence, that's part of that.
Awesome. There we go. Jim, thank you so much for being on the show again. It has been awesome to have you and learn from you. Until next time, as I mentioned, subscribe to the podcast, share this with somebody that you think needs to hear it. Sandler is here to help. So if you need it, reach out to us. And, chat to me, mike.montague@sandler.com. The How to Succeed podcast is brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training with over 200 locations. Find more at sandler.com. We'll see you next time.